with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So Rich and I just got back from a beautiful, beautiful vacation. My daughter got married, actually, in the Central Rockies in Breckenridge. Wonderful, wonderful time. I mean, that part of the country, Rich, in the summer, I mean, it is just so beautiful. I mean, Colorado is known a lot about skiing, but summer sports in the Central Rockies is becoming even more popular than the winter sports. I mean, it's just a great place to be. But, you know, I get back. And I get called to Bentonville, Arkansas, you know, to talk about tariffs. And tariffs is definitely on the minds of a lot of the American retailers right now. And what are we going to do about that? And you know, what's it going to do to the marketplace? And it's really a big puzzle, Rich. And I think that we're all trying to figure it out. But yet the economy just keeps on booming. Can you imagine that?
Well, yeah, these are actually very, very strong times right now, and tariffs have become a Main Street term. I mean, it's really interesting how things have changed. That those who would never be involved and have a care of what we're talking about in terms of tariffs and you know, relationships to, you know, the economics that are out there have become mainstream because all of a sudden people are talking about the reality of what it means to them. So it's really come home. And this is a very interesting debate to have because there are a number of people who understand the concept of why you know the administration is working with a tariff environment, and then there are those who violently oppose it or are completely on the other side. And I think this will be a good conversation to have because bottom line is it does affect everybody, and it's a very passionate topic right now.
Yeah, some positive, some negative, and everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to figure it out. Short term, long term. But I will tell you, Rich, a lot of small business owners out there are being impacted because there's no certainty. You know, it's kind of like, okay, well, just trust me. This President Trump, of course, I got this covered. I'm negotiating. This is a negotiating ploy. But let me tell you, a lot of people are getting impacted. And small businesses have been told, we got to do business in this sort of environment, and this is the way it is. And, past Republican and Democrat administrations, they talk tough, they do nothing. Unfortunately, the small business owner right now who's running a factory or who is importing a product or is trying to decide what they purchase, what they don't purchase, it's so crazy right now to decide how to invest your money. You buy stuff, 25% duties, and tomorrow they're gone. So now all of a sudden, all the cost of your goods now are inflated. If you don't buy enough, then you don't have the products to sell so you can pay your payroll. Crazy, crazy situation going on. Hey, but this is a wonderful moment to bring on our first guest, Michael Stumo, who is the president for a coalition for a prosperous America, and he definitely has some views on this topic. Michael, welcome to Made in America.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Michael, there's a blog on your website that the CPA, the Coalition for Prosperous America, is opposing this miscellaneous tariff act, and you call it the Never Made in the USA Again Act. Tell us about what this actually is and why you oppose it.
Sure. Just as background, right now we're shifting from the Clinton, Bush, Obama unilateral tariff reduction plan, unilateral trade disarmament, in which they made it easier for companies to either move offshore or procure from offshore. So they lowered our tariffs that gave certainty to move offshore and still re-export to the U.S. consumer market. Now we are seeing a pivot from free trade, unilateral free trade, to a more strategic trade, responding to other countries' trade cheating and our own national security needs, and raising tariffs on steel and aluminum so that we get that capacity back for our defense, industrial, and economic sectors, and also what's called 301 tariffs, which is responding to the most massive commercial espionage campaign by a state actor, i.e. China, that the world has ever seen. And so that's what's happening. Our members are seeing a lot of business coming back because now the uncertainty for overseas is reversed. It's more uncertain to be overseas than here. It's more certain here. We have a certainty advantage. Now, this
Well, explain that because, what's the certainty if there's a 25% duty today that could be gone tomorrow? I mean, how certain is that?
Sure. Well, number one, it is certain that if you are producing in the U.S. and selling in the U.S. and buying in the U.S., you will not face a duty. You know that, number one.
Well, 50% of what we import from China are raw materials and components that goes into our manufactured products.
Right, and a lot of it we used to make here. A lot of it we have production here that's being priced out by China's subsidies. And so the certainty is that you can still buy from the U.S. producer production, and you don't have to worry about the tariffs because there won't be a tariff on it. Secondly, and I just came from the White House, was there a couple weeks ago, and it's not like they told me this necessarily, but I know the people in the administration. I feel pretty certain. I've been telling our members who are feeling the tariff uncertainty too, and they're asking me, "What do you think?" I said, I think these are going to be here for a while. I think they're going to be here for a long time, at least through the Trump administration, because China is not going to change. Their whole business model is based upon overproduction, theft, subsidization. They're not going to change it for quite some time. So I think this is the new normal. It's not an uncertainty. They're here and then they're gone tomorrow.
You know, what's interesting, gentlemen, is that a couple of things come out this week regarding that, and these are on Fox Business News. One, Heritage Action Executive Director Tim Chapman had made the comment that small businesses are still optimistic despite tariffs, and they're not as negative as others would think they are. And then there was a piece out by the chair of UBS indicating that a good plurality of those that they surveyed are not against the tariffs either. And so it really is a very interesting conundrum to get through right now. And I appreciate, your side of the coin, what you're talking about.
Yeah, our members are, we have a lot of steel users that are affected by the tariffs. They don't like the price increases necessarily. Most of them, but they're all as busy, most all are as busy as they've ever been. They're buying new equipment. Most are able to pass on the increases, and by the time it gets to the consumer, it actually doesn't amount to that much. We've seen that with 6 years of steel price volatility because China dumped and then was stopped, and then they dumped and then they stopped, so it was volatile before. They just like stability. The absolute price isn't the big deal, but the volatility is a problem, and I think we're going to be in a new normal. Like you say, they're supportive, and even people who oppose the tariffs agree we've got to do something about China if we're going to have an economy in 20 years.
Well,
I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
All right. What I agree with that, and I think we have to recognize who the real challenger and who the real devil is out there for us right now, and it really is China. China's long-term goal, China's whole mission is to take over what we have, whether it's going to be militarily in terms of real power or it's going to be in terms of economic power. Either one's just as powerful, pardon the pun and the alliteration and the repetition, but that's the truth of the matter. And at some point, I would think, and I think you're very correct on this, a lot of people are saying, look, I don't like that we have to go down this road, but I do like that we're looking out for, number one, us. And somehow we have to say enough is enough.
That's exactly right. And I'm not one to really exaggerate, but this really can't be exaggerated. This really is like this is an epic struggle for the next hegemony, the next superpower in this world. And within 10 years, China can be or will be the biggest economy in the world, and then the geopolitical power could follow. And we can either do nothing or we can do something about it. And right now they are funding their rise by excessive reliance on the U.S. consumer market. Our trade deficit with China funds state-owned entities, state governments that own them, and the federal funds their military rise, the technology buying, everything that's going on there it's a really big deal. But that's an advantage because they're excessively reliant on us in that if we condition access to our market on them playing nice or balancing trade, we have the upper hand. And there's evidence right now that President Xi is getting a little shakier in his hold on the country.
Michael, do you have a few minutes more to you can come back after the break? Because I got a couple of things I'd like to ask you. Are you able to stick around?
Yes, sir.
Hey, we're listening to Michael Stumo, who is the CEO of a coalition for a prosperous America. Very fascinating discussion. He's obviously very plugged into this. And as an American manufacturer and as an importer, I definitely have some more questions I'd like to ask Michael. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. We're here with Michael Stumo, who is the president for Coalition for a Prosperous America. And obviously, he's got some very, very pointed views. He's very well connected about the tariff discussions here in our country and why they're being done and the huge impact going beyond what's happening in the next 30 or 90 days, going on to who will be the next superpower in this country, or will we have a rival superpower in this country, in this world, I should say, and is it going to displace the United States? Will China someday displace the United States as the world's economic superpower by using American technology and markets to do it? A very, very interesting discussion. So, Michael, we have another $200 billion of tariffs that I believe the recommendation on those tariffs are going to come, is it September 5th? And the president initially said it's going to be 10% on the next $200 billion. Then he said, well, I think I'm going to make it 25% on the next $200 billion. And, will they be implemented? And I think that you believe they will. And when actually do you believe they will be implemented, and what duty rate will they be at? And is there anything that can actually stop it?
Yes. First, there's already been tariffs imposed, and by August 23rd, the first couple tranches of tariffs will have been imposed on the first $50 billion of Chinese imports. Now, this is under a law called the Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act, which allows the president to take action against foreign countries who violate international norms or trade rules, and they documented the biggest, most persistent, massive commercial espionage campaign by a state actor in the history of the world, i.e. China, to use technology theft, forced technology transfer, weaponized incoming foreign direct investment to come here and buy our companies, etc. And the tariffs are designed to change their behavior and to deny them the benefits of their theft by selling back to the U.S. consumer market to get rich. Rather than changing its behavior, China doubled down and retaliated. So then Trump said, we'll do another $200 billion. And then China retaliated again rather than saying, we're going to stop the theft. And so Trump then said, we're probably going to go to 25% instead of 10% on the next $200 billion of Chinese imports. And so because the core issue is China changing its behavior and abiding by the rules, it's not. It is highly likely that the tariffs will go into effect. But China can stop it simply by stopping their campaign of commercial espionage.
And what does it mean to stop their campaign? I mean, what would they have to do? Oh, does President Xi come out and say, hey, I'm not going to steal from you anymore? I mean, he's not going to say that.
Right, actions, not words. The USTR in a March report, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, I should say, in a March report, documented this. It comes down to about 35 to 40 different methods that they use that we would never, ever use in this country, and actually neither would Europe. And if they found it, they would, make it go away to grab our advanced technology for their own advantage. So it's a big deal. They'd have to give up those 35 to 40 different practices, because if they only gave up 20, they'd have another 20 they could use. So this is not the feature, a bug in their economy. This is the feature. This is what it's built around. So this is going to be a long series of moves and counter moves. So we have to buckle up, really, and to get to the other side again if we're going to have an economy in 20 years.
Well, what I find interesting, and now that you said that, and we have to buckle up, and then in your piece that you did the other day, we're talking about the miscellaneous tariff bills that's out there. And you call it, and it's called the Never Make It Again Act. I mean, that seems almost oxymoronic to what we're talking about right now. Why would we, including conservatives, some conservatives in Congress, why would we even give some support to a bill that would be contraindicative of what we're trying to accomplish in the long term? It's almost as if we're underwriting our own demise.
We really are. This is a holdover, as I said in the last segment, of our past unilateral free trade, unilateral trade disarmament approach, where we thought dropping tariffs would give us cheap goods, which would make us rich, and we ended up offshoring our industry and our jobs. And now, as we're protecting ourselves, this bill still comes, and it actually has wide bipartisan support. So I got some nasty grams from congressional staff saying, why are you opposing this? But what the miscellaneous tariff bill does is it zeroes out tariffs on imports where we don't produce the product anymore, and it's certified not to produce. So you could say, well, what's the matter with that? Why should we tariff something that we don't produce? But we think, since we're trying to relocate and reshore production here, there should be a third element to the analysis, which is that what we're lowering tariffs on is something we could not and should not be making either. But if it's something that we should be making or could be making because we have related production or we have a strategic and economic strategy that would be good to do it, we should not just cede that sector forever by zeroing out incoming tariff rates so that foreign manufacturers have the permanent advantage and we'll never get into it again.
Hey, Michael, you've been a wonderful guest. Michael Stumo, CEO at the Coalition for a Prosperous America. This is really, really interesting stuff. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Coming up, we have William Dunkleberg, who's the chief economist for the National Federation of Independent Business. Despite these tariffs, small businesses are finding it hard to recruit people. Many, many jobs are going unfulfilled. Let's talk about that with William, just coming up here in a moment.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, tariffs, and more tariffs, and where's this going? Are they going to be here for a while? I mean, Michael just told us, Michael Stumo is CEO of the Coalition for Prosperous America, very, very plugged in to the White House and what's going on and the various players and the thought behind this and what it's going to take for these tariffs to go away. Seems like we could be in for a very, very frosty winter.
I'm very intrigued with the two bills that he was talking about. In the House and the Senate, and I'm stunned a little bit that there's a conservative support for some of them, because it does seem it's counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish with this administration. And if you understand the future, where we stand with Russia, not Russia, with China, then you have to embrace what we're trying to accomplish with these tariffs. So it's a very passionate subject, and I think. I think it's going to be very exciting next few weeks, months to see where we wind up with them.
But as I said at the beginning of the show, small businesses are going to ultimately be hurt by this. And, to retool your company, it's not a small investment. It's very big. And, the world that's really existed, since the 50s and the 60s, this sort of, we'll open our markets wide and we don't necessarily get reciprocal rights to foreign markets. I mean, it's just the way that America's been designed post-World War II. The Marshall Plan economy, that we've had. And yes, there's been lip service to getting tough, but, it's never happened before. But it's unfair, I believe, to put this burden on small businesses to say, okay, now we're just going to all of a sudden change the way you do business. We told you to do business this way. Now you're going to do business that way. And, you're on your own. You're on your own to figure this out until we, get tough here and try to figure it out ourselves. And, we're just making this up as we go. And I really believe that in large part that's what they're doing, making it up as we go. But nonetheless, small businesses are hiring and jobs are going unfulfilled. And many jobs are going unfulfilled. Let's bring on William Dunkleberg, who's a chief economist for the National Federation of Independent Business, to talk about what's going on in small businesses and job openings. William, welcome to Made in America. Glad to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, definitely small business is all about Made in America, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. And, we're all passionate here, and there's a lot of things to get passionate over. But our small businesses are doing well. And, I read on your website, small businesses can't find workers. I mean, there's job openings in construction and manufacturing and wholesale. I mean, a lot of jobs. And depending on where you are in the country, it's impossible to fulfill them. And, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a small business. I have nearly 700 employees, but, a lot of people still consider we are a small business. It's hard to find talented people. So, what's going on out there? Do we have a people deficit? Do we have a skills deficit? How are we going to fix that? If we're creating all these jobs and we have no one to fulfill them, are we creating these jobs for no reason at all?
Right. Well, we certainly have the openings. Things are really hot on Main Street, and as you know, collectively, small business accounts for almost half of private gross domestic product that we produce, and employs a good 50% or more of the private workforce. So, if they're doing well, the economy is likely to be doing well. At least it's important that they're doing well. So things are hot, and that means that they need more workers to produce more output. They're trying to find them. The job openings are there. They're at record high levels in our 45-year survey record. So we know this is a really tight economy. We haven't seen anything this tight. The only kind of comparable one is the late 1990s into 2000, back in the Y2K days. So they'd like to make more stuff. They obviously have customers to sell to. A great example would be all the little construction companies out there that build just a couple houses, maybe 10 a year. They would all like to produce more houses. We know in the aggregate level we need them. House prices are rising because we can't produce the output. Why can't we do that? Because we can't staff the construction crews that we need to get the work done.
What I find interesting, and I listen to a lot of the talking heads around the country, and particularly those on the left side a little bit. But I think the statement that we have more jobs than workers available right now, I mean, I think there are some really interesting realities that relate to that. What does that really mean? I mean, well, first of all, people have the ability to change a job, which they haven't had that ability for quite a while. That means they can move. That means they can, raise their income by getting a better job, because all of a sudden, if you don't like your job, you can leave your job, at least, plan to leave your job while you still have a job, which makes an awful lot of sense. And then at the same time, we're listening, we have the best workforce, or U6, in years and decades. And yet, I find it totally ironic that when I listen to certain, talking heads, it's like, oh my God, well, this isn't working. This economy is only for, the very large corporations. The middle class is getting wiped out. But the truth of the matter is, it really is agnostic in terms of the results that we're getting from this administration. And so, what do you say when someone says to you, well, what does that mean? We got more jobs. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely a good thing. And as you point out, it gives you an opportunity to change jobs and move up. And of course, moving up leaves a vacancy behind you, right? So, and the aggregate, unless we get more workers coming in, unless the labor force participation rate goes up, is going to be a lot of job switching. I could hire somebody, but that'll create a vacancy someplace else until we can grow the labor force. We know the labor force participation rate is lower than it was, say, back in 2000 or even in 2003. And part of that is demographic, but part of it is, and too many kids maybe going to college. There are a lot of things we talk about, but we need more workers and coming into the labor force. Our small businesses are raising compensation at record rates, 45-year record high levels. That's all we can really do in the short run is just bid more, trying to get the workers that we need to produce more. But we also start shaving our standards for hiring, and I'm sure we'll do more training as well to try to get the workers we need.
Hey, William, it's been really great to have you on the show, and it's great that our small businesses are in the hiring mode. I mean, we haven't seen that for a while, and I've heard a number of the Obama administration folks say it was because of President Obama. I doubt that that's true. It's deregulation, it's less taxes, it's pro-business, it's encouraging our entrepreneurs to get out there and creating the environment. That's why we're having these jobs. William, thanks for being on the show. William Dunkleberg, who's the chief economist for the National Federation of Independent Business. Thank you very much, William. Coming up, we have Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. And when I think about tax reform, I think about Grover Norquist. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruppman. Hey, Rich, we've done a lot of shows, during the Obama administration and, talking about tax reform. And, of course, the only tax reform back then was taxes going up. You're not paying your fair share. You're not paying your fair share. We got to tax. Let's take money away from the productive part of this society and give it to the unproductive part of society, our government. And, we know where that money goes. Well, we don't know. It's flushed down the Potomac somewhere, and it's definitely not put to work and creating jobs and doing good things. It's just down a big black hole. But, Rich, the person back then that I remember most, who was still out there fighting every day, you'd see him. We got to reduce taxes back during the Obama administration was Grover Norquist. He has always been out there fighting for less taxes. And, as an American, as any American, who could argue with less taxes, especially a small business owner or an entrepreneur?
So it's remarkable that he takes all the heat that he has been taking for so long now, and the man gets up, smiles, and moves forward and makes his points. I think it's excellent.
It's excellent. I mean, it's great to have people out there like Grover fighting for the American entrepreneur. So we've had a lot of great people on the show, and Grover's joining us now, and a guy who's been there for us is still there for us. He's probably got a smile from ear to ear right now, based on what's going on with taxes. Hopefully, we'll see some more tax cuts. Grover, welcome to Made in America. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, is with us right now. So, Grover, good things are happening, right? I mean, did we go far enough? I shouldn't ask you that question. You'd probably say we didn't go far enough, but this is still a good start, isn't it?
It is a very good start, and it is just a start, but it's a very good start. It's tough to remember how bad our tax policy was. Our corporate rate, the business tax, was 35%. Now, you look all around the world, China was at 25%. Communist China took 25% of what a company made. The United States, the free market United States, 35%, 10% more. Germany, 25%. So you really had a situation where we were hurting ourselves. You wonder, how come we can't compete better against the Chinese, the Germans, the Japanese? We were shooting ourselves in the foot, or rather our government was, on every business in the world, in the country, where we were taxing at 35%. That was brought down to 21%. We now have one of the lower taxes, not the lowest. That was just in Ireland, 12.5%. Pretty good. That's not bad. The president wants to go to 15%. I share his view that 15% is a good rate to get to on business tax. We cut all the individual rates. We went to taxing a territorial tax system instead of worldwide tax system. so we don't get double taxed. American businesses don't get double taxed. And we had $305 billion of American corporate earnings come back to the United States because we no longer punished businesses that brought their money back to the United States first 3 months of this year. It's been going for 6 months, so this may be twice this now. But it's $305 billion first quarter. We had another $30 billion tax cut in January. Small thing, good. We made some real progress. We cut taxes on smaller businesses. There are 28 million smaller businesses, many of them not incorporated. We cut their taxes 20% as well. And the good news is that the Republicans in the House and the Senate and President Trump have all stated that the goal is a tax cut every single year that you have a Republican Congress and a Republican president. Tax cut 2.0 is being worked out, but the most exciting thing may happen in the next month, and that's where the president, by regulation, can end the taxation of inflation in capital gains. Right now, if you buy a home, sell it 40 years later, you pay capital gains tax on all of the increased nominal dollar value, right? You bought it at $100,000, you sold it for $500,000. They say, oh, you made $400,000. Well, if you count inflation, you didn't make $400,000 because that each dollar is worth less. We're going to take the inflation gains out. That drops the capital gains tax on selling land, farms, stocks in your 401k, IRA, and will dramatically increase the wealth in the country because every asset in the country is worth more if it becomes a hedge against inflation for tax purposes. Very, very excited. President's for it. The head of the House and Senator for it. We just need to get the guys in the Treasury, the lawyers in Treasury to work it out and get this regulation going. So look for that. It's going to be a real kick in the pants for the economy.
Hey, Gruber, unfortunately we're out of time, but I got an idea for your next adventure. Americans for reining in government spending. You've been so effective on the tax side. You got to get our government spending down next.
Quite correct. That is the next project. And if we have a Republican House and Senate, I would bet the ranch that they will actually reform the entitlements in a meaningful way that will bring the unfunded liabilities of this country down by trillions with a T.
Ooh, I hope you're right. But I guess we got tax reform done, but I just don't see that. I mean, there's just too many people, eating out of that trough. I mean, Republicans and Democrats. But anyway, if you were leading it, I believe we have a great chance for that happening. Thanks for coming on the show, Grover. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, of which I am one. Coming up, Dr. Ruffman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, man, we had an incredible show today. I mean, our good friend Phil, just put this thing together. Wow, kudos to Phil. Great guests, great topics, and boy, we got the passion going. But let me ask you this, is that, Grover came on and he talked about, we got this tax reform, and I brought up, hey, but the deficit's going up. And, that's what the Democrats are going to say. Yeah, you got this tax reform and all these rich people are going to get all this money, but the deficit's going up. I mean, we said that about Obama, during his deficit spending. But Grover said a very good point. It's not that we are paying too little taxes. It's because our government's not reining in its spending. It's all about the spending that's the problem. It's not because of the taxes are going down. I think that's a great takeaway today, Rich.
That's a really good takeaway, but I'll tell you that the thing that concerns me, and I wish we had more time with Grover, is that we have two things that are really, really good about today's show. One, Grover Norquist was here. We talked about tax reform. It is working. It's doing good things for everyone in the country. It really is a great motivator for business in this country. It's repatriating money. It's creating jobs in the long run. It's giving everybody an opportunity for a leg up. And obviously the economy is reflecting in that. So that's all to the good. I'm very, very happy with that. We are creating, on our other guest prior to that, we're creating more jobs right now. And as a matter of fact, as we're pointing out, there are more jobs than there are people to fill those jobs. So what does that mean? The unintended consequences are, well, people get to pick and choose what they want to do, as opposed to under the Obama administration for the last 8 years prior, almost 8.5 years prior, that we were figuring out how to get 2 jobs or 3 jobs. And that thought leads me to the woman who's going to probably represent part of New York, Bronx area, and Queens, a little bit of Queens, is Cortez out of New York City, the social democrat, getting into Bernie again and all this other stuff that's far, far, far to the left. And it seems, I just find the whole thing an amalgam of craziness that's out there, Neal, because why is it that so many people are still saying, well, I'm going to vote Democrat? Why is it even a debate if you think about it? If you're thinking logically, it seems obvious. What we had for all these years leading up to Trump winning and becoming our president was a downward spiral. And we talked about it every week on our show. How many jobs did we lose this week? How many companies folded? How many companies are going overseas? I mean, we were actually looking in out, and now we're looking out in. So that's what confounds me, Neal. This whole thing.
So what do you think about the various elections that's just occurred? I mean, there's, depending on which news outlet you read, it's like the blue wave is coming. The blue wave is coming.
Yeah, well, the blue wave is
thing
coming.
In Ohio, hey, look, we lost the election, but that's a good thing because it was a tight election. I mean, how do you decipher this?
Well, look, first of all, you're right about one thing. How is it being filtered? If it's being filtered on all the C's, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, even to a degree CNBC, I mean, and then some of the other, CNN, there's another C for you. But how can it be that people are still debating whether they should stick with what we've got right now, which is amazing growth, or they're going to go and go back to what they had prior to that, because the growth isn't fair? I mean, I find that to be so amazing. What I find amazing is that all those have been supported by the far left individuals in the last elections last week did not win. I mean, they did not win. The Social Democrats did not win.
Yeah, what's going to happen with wages, though? That's going to be important in this midterm. Because, there's been a lot of jobs, but are wages increasing? And wages increasing, is going to make a lot of people feel good. Hey, look, that this economy does work for everybody. But William Dunkleberg, chief economist for the National Federation of Independent Business, who was just with us, in his piece this week, he points out that, indeed, wages are going up, up across the economy.
Yep.
So everybody's participating in this robust economy. Not only you're getting a job, but you're getting a job with better wages, or you're in a job and you can go to another job and get paid more. I mean, that makes everybody feel good. And I think, as we often hear, the old adage that people vote with their pocketbooks, people making more money.
Hey, it comes down to what Reagan said. President Reagan said, are you better off now than you were last year? That's what it comes down to. People have to ask that question. And I think it's resoundingly yes.
Or how was that 401k doing? So that's right. So, hey, Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time. We are out of time. Boy, did it go by fast. But we've had some really fascinating discussions. But we do that all the time here at Made in America. Tune back next week at the same time for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.